You're listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner, your source for investing made easy. Here's Andy Tanner.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. This is where investing's made simple. And as always, we have a wonderful show on deck and a fantastic guest. You're going to find this absolutely fascinating if you deal with people at all, and that means all of us. So we'll introduce right out of the gate. I'll let him introduce himself, but we have Dreeke on the program, and he is a former FBI guy and counterintelligence, and awesome stuff. And he's written 3 books. We're going to talk about all 3, and his specialty is predicting how people might behave, as a behavioral specialist. We're going to talk about those behavioral concepts and, sizing people up a little bit. So with that brief introduction, Robin, welcome to the program, and thank you for participating today.
Andy, thank you so much for having me on such a great show. I love looking up what you do and entrepreneurship. Who doesn't love entrepreneurship? Because it gives us the power to create and work with people. Like you said, it's the most important thing we do is just build those relationships so we can all prosper, no doubt.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people might say, why is it so important to be able to, not judge people, but just kind of size them up and predict, what they might do? Well, I know in entrepreneurship and as a team, even as a stock investor where you think you wouldn't deal with people, understanding how to build a team, putting people around you that you can trust and have some stability in how they might behave. Every dollar we ever make comes from other people. And if you have a great team, you'll make more of those dollars. So an awesome thing. Before we get into how to predict the behavior of others, just a little bit more on your background. How does a person decide to become part of the FBI, and how did you work your way into this specialty? Because it's fascinating.
Thanks. I'm laughing to myself because it's probably the most common question I get, because probably my major, if you want to call it a major title and accomplishment inside the FBI, was I was the chief of our counterintelligence behavioral analysis program. Mm-hmm. So my job was, for the number of years I ran the team, was we conducted behavioral assessments for counterintelligence cases around the country, whether it was recruiting spies or double agent operations or false flags, all the hooky spooky spy stuff. And everyone thinks that's really cool. Sounds really fun. They always said, so how did you get to do that? I said, let me tell you. When I was in high school, I wanted to go to the Naval Academy, and I did. It took me an extra year to get in, almost took me an extra year to get out. And I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, Navy pilot, test pilot, Blue Angel, and astronaut. And I said, well, how'd you get into, and they said, how'd you get into behavioral sciences? And I said, it's easy. I failed at all those things.
That's classic. That is fantastic. I am a very typical type A hard charging guy that are entrepreneurs. I mean, I'm speaking with my people here. But what happened was, when you deal in the world of leadership first, like I was at the Naval Academy and the Marine Corps, because that's what I did after Naval Academy before the FBI. And then when you come in the FBI, and my job was to recruit spies, if you have this hardcore type A personality, which is basically, my job is basically sales, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But, if you have that type A personality, you're going to fail majestically if you're trying to build teams and try to build relationships, which is nothing but leadership and nothing but selling a product to people. If you try to poke them in the eye with convincing them to do something, you're going to get walls up, and your brand will get ruined, and no one wants to work for you. So it was me following a path of trying not to be the moron I felt I was born to be. That is, well, first of all, anyone that can get in the Naval Academy is smarter than me. I can tell you that right now. That's an amazing history. When you think about, there's an interesting dynamic to this that we'll get into in terms of trust, because there's a lot of deception in the spy business. And yet you would think so. Yeah. And yet in the corporate world, or even in the entrepreneurship world, deception is not the same as strategy, right? You want to be open, you want to be honest with people. So we'll get into those differences and how that works out. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about trust. You have a book that I have not read yet that is on the list now, called The Code of Trust. And I'll set this up maybe in a different way than even business. Let's say someone is in a marriage or a relationship,
the most important relationship someone can enter into. And I know people who are in the relationship and stay there because of a deep and abiding love. And yet for a relationship to function properly, it's tough for people to get out of those because they say, well, the love is there. I love this person. But yet there's also an ingredient that's probably even more important than love, and that's trust. You can have all the love you want, but if there's no trust, that relationship will not function properly. And so a lot of people, they don't see it that way. They say, look, I love this girl or this guy, I'm going to stick with them, and yet they're not trustworthy. So talk a little bit about what you mean by the code of trust, and let's start there.
So trust. The book of the Code of Trust, what it's about is what our behavior needs to exhibit in order to inspire people to want to trust us. Mm-hmm. And then sizing people up is reversing it. But so basically what you want to do is first, the core of all human beings. Every single human being on this planet is genetically and biologically coded to want to belong to meaningful groups and organizations and affiliate with them and be valued by the same. Mm-hmm. And so all I have to do is demonstrate that I want to affiliate with you and demonstrate your value to you, and you're going to trust me and want to have a relationship with me. And we do this. I always have these 4 core things you want to include in everything you say and everything you write. And that is 1, seek the thoughts and opinions of others. And in a relationship, if you're seeking the thoughts and opinions of the other person, you're demonstrating you value them. Mm-hmm. Second, talk in terms of their priorities. And when you talk about people that are in love, yes, there's a chemical reaction going on there, but also the reason why you do things together is because you have overlapping priorities, needs, wants, dreams, and aspirations. And so you talk in terms of their priorities. 3, validate them, who they are, their thoughts and opinions and ideas without judging them, which is the key component of a good, healthy relationship, is don't judge the context, how that other person sees the world through their optic. Mm-hmm. You can't judge it. And finally, and appropriate, give people choices, because again, we only give people choices if we want to affiliate with them and we value the fact that they're going to make a choice that's good for us as well. So if you build one of those 4 things into everything you say and do, that starts that language process of demonstrating affiliation, demonstrate that you value that other person. And their brain, our ancient mammalia brain that we have, and reptilian brain, we are hardwired and coded for wanting to feel like we're affiliated and valued. And so dopamine starts flowing, oxytocin in the bloodstream. Our pleasure centers are firing when we do one of those 4 things in everything we say, write, and do.
I think that one of the, we've explored the cosmos a little bit, and we've gotten deep in the ocean, and we've explored all these places. But I think these references to neuroscience and the neurotransmitters that are triggered by the machinery of our brain are fascinating. Like the reaction when choice is removed as opposed to given. Nothing will start a fight faster than when people are forced. I mean, that's terrorism, basically. Do what I say or else. And we have forms of terrorism in our marriages and in our businesses and our relationships. So these are 4 things that I think are actionable. I mean, if I were listening right now, I'd say, you know what? I'm going to take the month of January, and week 1, I'm going to seek the opinions of others. I'm going to try just to focus on that. Every person I meet, let's find out what that's good old-fashioned Dale Carnegie stuff. Be genuinely interested in people. And then, then the second week, maybe I say, okay, I'm going to really speak in the terms of finding out what this person's priorities are. 3rd week, validate without judge. 4th week, try to see how I can speak and communicate in terms of A or B or choices or multiple choice. That's personal development that'll help anyone start off 2020 in a better way that they did. Let's flip that over then. So you said that sizing people up is the opposite, and we're not judging. You mentioned that we validate without judging. Talk a little bit about the reverse of that.
So what was interesting is that the more I did this and focused on what I needed to do to inspire someone to want to trust me, the more I started realizing that other people, every human being on this planet, I realized is exceptionally predictable. I can predict what everyone on this planet is going to do. Mm-hmm. We're all going to always act in our own best interest.
Yeah, for sure.
So my job is just to figure out what they think is in their best interest, not what I think it is, but what they think it is. And so it makes you focus, especially, hardcore type A entrepreneurs. I am anyway. I am a very self-centered individual. Without even realizing it, I am always talking in my own best interest.
Certainly.
And so I had to figure out how do I get outside myself and focus on others to make it about them so their brain will reward them for engaging with me? And so I just have to talk with my own best interest. And so when I broke it down, it came down to these 6 signs that I was looking for, when recruiting spies inside the FBI and recruiting sources to help recruit spies and all these things. And it's really very simple. The first thing I'm looking for is vesting. Is this person actually demonstrating through language and deeds that they're actually vesting in my success? Or are they just self-centered on their own? And here's the other thing, too. Each of these 6 signs, you don't have to have them all. And they're going to be varying degrees and levels. It gives you a measure, though, to start with so you can actually assess people in your life that you do trust, that they're doing exactly what they say they're going to do and they're successful doing it. So you can measure them, and then you can assess everyone according to that same baseline. So vesting is one thing. Second is longevity. Are they using the type of language with me and actions that is demonstrating that they are looking for a longer-term relationship with me, or is it just a quick pro quo?
Mm-hmm.
Third is reliability. Can they actually do what they say they're going to do and get it correct? So that actually comes down to their confidence. Then fourth, actions. And this is that age-old adage of, what's the definition of crazy? Do the same thing a couple times and expect different results. This is reversing it. So their action. In other words, if I observe someone doing something 1, 2, or 3 times, I can almost guarantee the 4th time they're going to do it exactly the same way. So thereby I can predict what they're going to do. Language. Language is key here. Those 4 things I just said, for the anchors for our language to demonstrate to others, seeking their thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of their priorities, validate them, and empower them with choices, is that individual that we're assessing, are they using that language with us? Because if they are, they know how to focus on us. And finally, I think this is the most important one out of them all. Emotional stability. In the face of stress, anxiety, resentment, frustration, do they maintain emotional stability or do they go off the rails? Because if they maintain emotional stability, that means they can cognitively think through all these things. Because basically, the whole purpose of being able to size people up, so yes, you want to predict their behavior, but the reason why I love predicting their behavior is so that I maintain a good, healthy relationship. In other words, just because I like someone doesn't mean I can trust them to do X, Y, and Z. So if I like someone and I give you a job to do and I hope you're going to do a good job, you're going to fall short most likely because I base it off of subjective input, which had nothing to do with what I can reasonably expect you're going to do in each situation. So I love managing my expectations of people by understanding exactly what I can expect from them. Now, here's the cool thing. When I took that much time to focus on them, then they're either going to meet that bar that I set or exceed it. Now, here's what's really cool. If they fall short of the bar, because I took all the time to figure these things out, if they fall short of the bar, that means something's going on in their life. Now I can make myself an available resource for them to see if I can be a solution to whatever challenge they're having. Again, the entire process maintains a good, healthy relationship because you're maintaining good expectations of everyone around you.
This is absolutely fascinating. It's strange because entrepreneurs or employees or investors, they're all people and they all have families, they all have marriages, and you have to balance all this stuff. And it's absolutely fascinating as we went through the 6, and as I read through these, before we had a chance to meet, and that vesting just hit me like a ton of bricks because I met a girl. Fell head over heels because she was just drop dead gorgeous and the beauty queen, all this stuff. And yet there was just something wasn't there. And it, I've always told the story, we just never got together, whatever it was. And there was no vesting.
Yeah.
And yet when I met my wife, when I think back of the first moments with her, the vesting was incredible. Like she didn't even know me. And yet I could see this vesting happen. This stuff is very, very real as we think about it. So let's talk about this then. You train. How does a person? Is it just practice? I mean, those are 6 things, and a person has to have a pretty good awareness as an observer. Most people, I think, when they're in conversations, are more worried about what they're going to say. We're not very good listeners usually. At least a lot of us aren't. And how is this a skill that people have naturally? Can you acquire this? If someone wanted to increase their ability to observe these things and see what they look like, I'm sure they can, obviously you can go to Amazon and learn this in the book. What is it that can help someone develop that skill of seeing those things?
That is a great question. And it's very doable. I always, my books I've written are my manuals on how not to be the moron I was born to be, I would say, because I'm not naturally, some people are naturally born doing this. My wife is one of those natural born validators of others. That's why I married her, because she made me feel great about who I was.
That's awesome.
Because she was vested, she had longevity, I mean, all the things that we talk about here. But no, if I can do it, anyone can. So the first key is what we're doing right now, giving labels and meanings to behaviors that we see every day. Mm-hmm. And I call it that new car effect. And we've all had that experience where as soon as we bought a new car, all of a sudden we start seeing that same make and model everywhere.
Yeah.
Because it has a label and meaning. So giving these labels and meanings to behaviors clears the fog so we can see with a little more clarity. And then it's just practice. I tell you, and you said it already, create a personal growth thing for yourself for the new year. And, for you do one of these things in each of the 4 months, in each of the weeks of the first month. But at the same time, if you could do 2 things every day of every week, and that is with everyone around you, seek to find their greatness. Everyone's got an insecurity. Everyone's working on something, but seek what they're, find out something they did awesome that day or who they are as a human being. It might not even be at work. They might suck at work, but they're great dads or fathers or wives or something like that. And the other thing is identify priorities of others. Whatever challenges they're having in life, identify those things, because that's what you need to be a resource for. Because if you want to develop those relationships, you need to understand what they're great at and understand what their challenges are and be a resource for them in both those areas. And so that forces people like me outside of ourselves, and starts that conversation of understanding the other person. And then with these labels not in judging, but labels in understanding, so you can so you can clearly see them. You say, all right, are they vested? Do they have longevity? Are they reliable? And again, some of these things aren't going to be there. I mean, these are 6 very, very deep things. My best friends in the world probably have 2, but they have 2 at a very deep level. And so that's what you're looking for. And so just having those labels and meanings, recognizing them, and the more you practice recognizing them, like before you pick up a phone to have a phone call, or before you have a meeting or go out for a cup of coffee, I used to keep these things in my pocket. I take out my little, sticky note I had in my wallet and take a quick look at my, 6 little things right here. I said, all right, they're just on the top of my mind. And I just go have a good, healthy engagement and a good dialogue with someone. And all of a sudden during the course of that conversation, without even trying, he's like, oh, wow, he just gave me a sign of vesting. That's pretty cool. You're saying this to yourself. So you're going to recognize these things. Or if they don't happen, you're also going to recognize when you reflect after the conversation, do your little self-debriefs, like, wow, he didn't do or she didn't say or do one thing that hit any of these 6 signs, which is fine. I just know what to expect from this relationship. Probably not much.
Let's talk about relationships that we're in. If someone's just starting out and they have no relationships, watch for these 6 things, you'll build better ones. But sometimes you get vested in father-son relationships, mother-daughter relationships, husband-wife relationships, business partner relationships, client relationships. I know that as an entrepreneur, you have many different clients, many different customers, many different partners and vendors. And these things can become complex. Let's say that someone listening is evaluating their current relationships, and they see that there's just a lack of trust, that a person has not either been trustworthy by their actions, or their stability has been low. They freaked out emotionally when instead of being able to be stable, or whatever the 6 they've continued to violate time and again, particularly actions. Does a person just cut bait and run? Do they try to repair? I mean, that's a tough thing, because when a person isn't trustworthy and that trust is violated time and again, how do you recover from that? Is it something you repair? Is it something you run through? I think that's one of the most difficult questions in any relationship to figure out. Do you deal with it or just run?
So it's a very broad question, and I'll give you a couple lanes in which to deal with it. So first, let's address if someone has blown your trust. Yeah. Or you've blown their trust. It's very, very challenging to get it back, because basically if someone has lost trust, it means that there's been a betrayal from the perception of the other person. Might not even be true, but it's perception is the rule in everything you deal with human beings. Mm-hmm. And if the other person perception, because trust is a betrayal of something. And so the only way to get it back is to have full transparency and clarity in whatever areas they deem that you didn't have that transparency and clarity in, as much and as frequently as they want it. Mm-hmm. And the timeline is on them. So you can just from my description of it, you can hear that's a lot of work, and you basically have to give yourself up to them in order to gain that trust back. If that's not worth the energy, first of all, then don't lose trust to begin with, or just realize you're probably not going to get it back. Now, second, when we talk about trustworthiness, the one reason I love this process, because trust isn't to me a blanket. Like if I trust you, I can trust you to do everything.
Yeah.
No, that's why it's called predicting behavior. Because in other words, I use a pilot analogy. I do angel flights. I'm a volunteer pilot. I just general aviation kind of guy. I have lots of great friends I trust with many things. But I'll tell you what, I'm not going to throw any one of them a set of keys to a plane because they have no competence in that area. And
that's
so
a fantastic
I know that's not
qualifier. That is a fantastic qualifier to take away the blanket statement of I either trust you or I don't. That's fantastic.
Keep, so in all my interactions that I have with all human beings, I'm looking at where's your lane and what lane can I predict your behavior in? And then if all of a sudden you fall short in another lane, I don't have resentment or anger against it. I just realize, all right, that's not a lane for us to work in. Let's keep with this lane. Maybe we can explore another lane. So it's very, very specific to area, because just like we don't want to blanket trust everyone, I don't want to blanket not trust everyone either. Everyone's got an area, because even if don't have transparency with me in a healthy relationship in one area, well, in another area you might. So the big thing, that's why the big thing is don't judge. Don't judge anyone. Everyone's doing the best they can with what they have in the lanes that you're overlapping in. And if it's just not healthy in one lane, then don't go in that lane. See if there's another lane you can operate in. And if for some reason at the end of the day you can't find any lanes, well, then you say, well, thanks a lot, and not today, but maybe tomorrow.
That's fantastic relationships counsel in business, in family, in darn near everything. That's a fantastic segment. Right there. So your counterintelligence, you're building trust with people who you're an enemy with. Now that's a fascinating thing. What's that like? And you go out and you're going to try to be an agent or a spy, and you're trying to get people to trust you when you're really. I mean, that's a tough position to be in for people. I think that's like a hard job, right?
It is, I call it the hardest sales job in the face of the planet. So I'll tell you exactly what this is. I love sharing this because it breaks it down so everyone can understand it. So my job, when I was in New York and all my different field offices, my job was to recruit spies. And basically, I'm a salesman selling a product. The product I was selling was a concept that patriotism to the United States is a good thing. That's my product. And I'm trying to sell it to someone who is a foreign operative, an intelligence officer from a foreign country. So that's the first challenge of that sales pitch, is that I'm selling my product to someone who definitely does not want to buy it. Second challenge is that by treaty, generally these foreign intelligence officers are diplomats. And so by treaty, it's illegal for me to actually approach them and even try to sell my product to them. So that's a second challenge. And so... yeah. And then the third challenge that I'd like to talk about is, in the world of law enforcement, like the FBI, generally people have a compulsion to talk to you because they've done something illegal. Right. Well, in my spy world, believe it or not, spies very rarely conduct illegal activity. They're collecting intelligence, and intelligence is nothing more than, a lot of times, open source information that gets sourced to an individual that makes it valuable. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's like how FEMA responds to a disaster because that country doesn't have that kind of disaster response protocol, or sometimes it can be, national security kind of stuff. But generally, it's anything where there's an information gap that another country has. And again, nothing illegal about it, but it's intelligence, and it costs us money that they don't have to develop it on their own. So you put those three things together, and you're like, that is a tough sales job. And so what it comes down to is, so how do you sell that product? Well, it's just like you sell any product. My job was to figure out which of these individuals had priorities that overlapped with mine, and give them resources in terms of those priorities. In other words, say an individual that their dying wish of their mother, father, grandparents, whatnot, was that their grandchildren wouldn't grow up under a dictatorship regime or in this communist country. Well, that's a priority that I have a resource for, and I can share my priorities with them. My priorities for them is, hey, tell me what you're trying to get, and the things you're targeting, and your methods and protocols. And if you're willing to exchange our resources in terms of our own priorities, well, then we can have some trust and have a relationship. Because the big thing, and you mentioned at the beginning, the big thing I didn't do, and I still don't, my anchors in everything I do is, my number one anchor is a healthy professional relationship. Number two is open, honest communication and transparency. I did not use trickery, falsification, pretext calls, none of that stuff. I am straightforward, honest about everything, because if you don't start out with that, no one's going to trust you. And in the world where people's lives are on the line, and their family's safety and well-being, if they don't trust you, why would they buy your product? They're not. And so if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere.
As I look at the asset classes in my life as an investor, stock investing and, options trading, a little bit of real estate, entrepreneurship, the one I'm weakest in is like oil and gold and commodities. But in the ones I'm strong in, where I see cash flow come into, the ability to deal with people has been paramount. It's been a huge, huge thing. And I've noticed in a lot of salespeople feel that persuasion is manipulative, that it's me versus you, that the win-wins are, a lot of people go for win-lose a lot of the time. And as you said, there's this real difficulty in letting go of self-interest and focusing on the priorities of others. So this awareness, these books are worth picking up. It's fascinating. I love having authors on the program because I read a lot, and I didn't do a lot of good study in high school. I was more of a basketball junkie, and I really missed the boat. I really missed the boat in school. And after school, I realized, you can read a book a week and learn a lot. And the 3 books we're talking about here is Sizing People Up, a veteran FBI agent's user manual for behavior prediction. It's the second book is It's Not All About Me. And the third book is Code of Trust. I want to give people your website. It's www.peopleformula.com. And, you mentioned it before we went on the air. We were talking about, the podcast and the work it takes to do one. I've got to tell you, Robin, the opportunity to speak with people like you on a regular basis is fascinating. And a lot of people might think, well, wouldn't it be fun to take Robin out to dinner and pick his brain? Well, for a few dollars, for a few dollars, you can go to Amazon.com and you can have something. I know what it's. I've written 2 books, and it takes a long time to do that, to organize what you know and put in a format for people to read. So I really recommend that. A lot of people don't have $300,000 to go to law school, but they got $20 to go buy a book on Amazon, and they're just so valuable. Let's talk about this. We're trying to predict people's behavior. What are some of the behaviors? Can you give me some examples of behaviors that you've been able to predict?
Sure. Actually, one of the examples from the book, I fictionalized it so that no one felt harmed or injured from it. But, my last couple of months where I was still, before I retired from the FBI, I was working on a project. And the guy that took the initiative to take charge of the project didn't have any background in the industry whatsoever that we were going to hold a conference in. And I remember just sitting in the first meeting with him and listening to him talk to the team about the things he was going to do. And what he lacked was reliability. He had 0 backgrounds and knowledge in the area in which he was taking charge. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't tapping the right people to do it. And so I knew from the get-go this was going to be a disaster because he was not focused on the content that he needed to be focused on to bring the project to fruition. So it was I quickly distanced myself from it because he didn't want my thoughts and opinions, because it was an area that I had a strength in. I knew other people in the room also had a strength in this area. And he was so self-centered and self-inflated about his knowledge of this particular subject. Mm-hmm. And it became quickly transparent. His reliability was in the can. And his language not vested in anyone else. He had no vesting in us. Longevity, there was none of that. I mean, he was spiking down on all these different areas. And so you just knew it was going to be a disaster. And it was. But here's what's really good, though. It was a disaster in this one area. Now, did I hold any kind of animosity or grudge about him? No, because he was a very good. So this was a people-oriented kind of event we were trying to host. Meanwhile, this guy's a fantastic technical expert in another area. So in other words, I knew not to engage him or become part of this project because it was a train wreck because of all these signs were spiking 0s. But I knew I had no problem engaging him in this other area because that was his strength. He had tons of reliability in this other area. So I knew, so I bifurcate. And so I think that's the quickest example that most of us see in life is that, and we've all been in those meetings where someone starts talking or assign something and everyone's eyes start rolling because there's no confidence there whatsoever. And so it can be overcome, though, because if they start showing signs of self-awareness, like, all right, I don't have confidence there, so I need to grab Jack, Mike, and Jane to help me because they actually do have confidence, well, then we know it's going to be okay. So it's, again, just being very aware of all the behaviors that people are exhibiting in these different situations and what it's actually going to mean tomorrow.
I have the opportunity to consult with great friends and great business relationships that I have and to help people build their teams. This is going to be something I'm going to use more and more, because the cost of bringing in someone that is not the right fit and not being able to predict that behavior, it's very, very costly. And yet when you can get it right, it can be very, very profitable. Let's finish with this idea of, we've talked a lot about trust, and this is a theme that's important for today, because, and maybe it's just my perception, maybe I'm wrong on this, but it feels to me that there's so much self-interest now that we've become so self-absorbed, and there's so much me. It doesn't feel like I felt when I was growing up younger. I feel like there's a lot of mistrust in institutions. For example, Wall Street, or even the rich, or politically, or corporately. It seems like if there were a trust meter, or if we were to poll people, do you trust your government? Do you trust Wall Street? Do you trust your employer? Do you trust? It just seems like it might be at an all-time low. Is that my perception, or is there any data to support that? Or how do you feel about trust in general?
Well, I'd say the only data is the polling, and the polling says you're absolutely right. But here's a great question to ask yourself. And, again, it's a great segue to circle back to what we started out with. Whether you're dealing with political figures on either side, I don't care, or you're dealing inside the corporate world, ask yourself, during the course of the last interaction that this individual had with me that wants my trust, how often did they seek my thoughts and opinions, talk in terms of what was important to me, validate me and who I am, and gave me choices? And I guarantee you it's at an all-time low.
Wow.
They're telling me what I should, they're telling me what I should 100%. Think. They're telling me what I like. They're talking in terms of their priorities, and they're giving me no choices.
They're very dogmatic in what's right and wrong, and it's like, this is how to live, and this is how you need to do it, and you need to give me your money so you can do what I say.
Right.
I mean, the 401k stuff works that way, the political stuff works that way, and it's a shame. I just go back to the most simple analogies. It's just the way my poor little, dumb jock brain works, but when I was playing basketball, you got 5 guys out there, and you need 5. You can't have 4. And when you leave your man in a defense to help, maybe cut off some penetration, you've got to have trust that your teammate above you will drop down and take your spot, and help the helper. And I've missed that trust, because the guys I played with in college, we didn't win every game. We won a championship. We won a lot of games. But that to me, just knowing that a guy has your back when you have his back, and that you're vested together, in a long-term thing, 4 years, as long as you can do it. Those things, the actions, the stability, the vesting, the reliability, that was our team, man. That was our team.
That's it. They were demonstrating it all. Yeah.
I mean, it was all there. Every bit of the language was there. The stability was there. The reliability, the talent was there. And boy, what a wonderful thing if we could get that in more of our businesses, and more of our schools, and more of our communities, and more of our churches. These books are worth reading, and they're doing a lot of good in the world. Any final thoughts? You've been so gracious with your time. Any final thoughts for the listeners? These people that listen to our podcast, they're generally entrepreneurs, investors, people, they're interested in real estate or putting money to work for them and building businesses. What do you say to those guys? What's your message?
My message, actually, I'm going to reemphasize something you said throughout this podcast, that reading. Years ago, I went through the undercover school for the FBI. It's 2 weeks long of intensive, all these tools and techniques and doing all these things and interviewing and deception and all that. But we had this very senior agent got up in front of us, and he held up, it was the first time I saw this in my life. I was very young, this back in 2001, and he held up Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And out of all these great schools and tools and techniques and classes, he held up that book and he goes, "Welcome to the world of self-education." He goes, "No one can teach you a lot of this stuff. You've got to learn it. And the only way you're going to learn it is you've got to read, digest, practice, reflect, read more, digest, practice, reflect." That's the cycle of self-education. So I couldn't emphasize more to you and your listeners. Everyone's got tools. They're all saying very similar things about understanding human beings, and they all have their own framing, but that's it. Understand core of human beings, what each human being is seeking and craving. They're seeking being affiliated. They want to be valued. You include that in your language. You build healthy relationships above all else. You don't have deception, and you be a resource for the success and prosperity of others with no expectation of reciprocity, which is a hard thing for people to fathom. I guarantee you're going to have a healthy relationship, and they're going to want to be a resource for you in your life.
Well, it might be some bad news that trust is an all-time low, but I'll tell you it's good news because I feel choices are an all-time high. A person can ask those questions of themselves, especially in terms of their priorities. And there are definitely mentors, teachers, authors, there's technology. We've never been more connected. Even if trust isn't there, the choices are for all of us. And so I encourage everyone to make those choices. Robin, I hope we can have you on the program again sometime. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed speaking with you, listening to your background and your history, and these are incredible tools. These 6 behavioral concepts, these 4 elements of trust. They're just so. I think the word I would use is practicality. These are practical things that can be implemented. That I know. I'm excited. I know my 2020 will be better by putting these things in my purview. You mentioned the new car syndrome and the reticular activation system in our brains that helps us decide whether to be awake or sleep or focus. And these things are certainly going to be in my focus for me to observe. And I hope everyone will be better for it. So thank you again. This has been the Cash Flow Academy podcast. We've been speaking with Robin Dreeke, former FBI agent, awesome author, great speaker. And we wish you guys the best. And again, we thank you for tuning in to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner. For more information on investing made easy, go to thecashflowacademy.com.